Whoever controls the narrative controls the world. That's all you're seeing in efforts to manage information via censorship, algorithm changes, fact-checking, Russian propaganda panic, etc. Humans are story-driven animals. So if you control the stories, you control the humans. You've heard me say it a little different. If you control the stimulus, you control the response. If you control the perception, you control the reality. They're after the control of the narrative, boys and girls. And I hope, against all hope, that y'all are paying attention. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, and certainly not employers. They are considered thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind. They are guaranteed to kick your ass. Once again, boys and girls, it's time for the Sunday sermon. Appreciate all the usual suspects for showing up early. As usual, we're back in Iowa, reluctantly. Everybody in for the drum roll. Yes, indeed. Coming back to you from an extended stay in a remote region of the Cornfield State. That's not the actual name of the state. Technically, I'm relatively sure it's something else, but if there was any justice and truth to the equation, it would be called the Cornfield State, because it is essentially one big cornfield with some roads running through it. And, apparently a Microsoft data center that's being built that requires people with skills operating certain types of heavy machinery. So there's that. But yeah, that's what's going on here. It was very, very good to get back to Spokane, Washington for a weekend last weekend, and hopefully some things are in the works that are going to play out that'll allow me more frequent exposure to the great Northwest. But in the meantime, we are back among the corn and the people who don't know that slower traffic is supposed to merge to the right. A couple of trademark things about this lovely little state of Iowa. We got a lot of good stuff to get into today, guys. It's going to be meandering a bit, but if you stay with me, I think it's all gonna tie in together. Going to be kind of out of order in the way that we're doing our segments and things like that, but fuck it, man, we'll get it figured out. Trust you guys' judgment. Oh, right on, man, right on. Okay, so we got roll call. About to get ahead of myself. We got Joey, the Salt of Sarcasm. We got Brother James Pearson. Oh, my goodness, man. We have Roman from Opium Tales. Good to see you, brother. Wayne Sharp, Chris Reyes, Brother Ryan. I know I'm twice as ugly on that big screen TV as I am on a small screen, so I'm glad that you're there. We got Emmy. Who else? Mr. Wright on board. Joel. Hopefully the post-trip endorphins haven't worn off yet, my friend. By the way, kudos on you for growing your own. As anybody who's followed here knows, I am a big fan of psychedelics for consciousness expansion. I've been off the hard stuff for a little over 24 years now. Nobody gets to tell me what it is to be sober. A lot of people would say that if I'm still doing psychedelics, that I'm technically not sober. I've never identified as sober. I identify as clean, but not necessarily sober. The 12-step people can suck it. Psychedelics are a powerful tool for consciousness expansion, and they are advocated by Graham Hancock, who we'll be discussing in another capacity here in a couple of minutes. Before we get started, I neglected to do this because I was overjoyed with being in Spokane, and I didn't want to put a dark damper on it, but the program lost a supporter, and I lost a friend. My buddy Flint, who you have seen on my page and on the fan page and on some of the early live videos as either Michael Flint Houston or Flintus the biologist. You guys will remember him. He was taken from us very, very suddenly and very unexpectedly. the best indication has it that it was problems that had developed with his gallbladder. He was way too young to have been taken out like that, and he leaves behind a family. And I would hope that my people of faith would offer up prayers for his surviving family that were left behind. Flint, as of just last year, became a denizen of the Northwest. He had dreamed of it for a shorter time than I had, but had dreamed of it nonetheless. And he found a job and relocated his family up there. He was a damn good man. The significance of Flint to me as a prepper, when I first met Flint, it was in the wake of Hurricane Ike. Now, obviously, I have been a lifelong prepper, and my stores were well stocked for that hurricane and everything that came after that. But I met him through a mutual friend in the wake of that hurricane when I was checking up on said mutual friend, and we got into a discussion on preps and things like that. And it was over the course of that discussion that he loaned me one of the early copies with the original cover, a copy of James Wesley Rawls' Patriots, a novel of the coming collapse. And it renewed my interest. It renewed my enthusiasm for being a prepper and a survivalist. I am an old motherfucker, as you all know, and my early days with survival and prepping go back to the works of Mel Tappan, Tappan on Survival from back in the day. I used to read his column religiously in Guns and Ammo, and I had his book. James Wesley Rawls is the heir apparent to Mel Tappan's legacy, and it was Flint that turned me on to that, and we bonded over that and built a friendship over the years that was very important. And even if we had only had that meeting, even if we had only met that one time, the fact that he turned me on to James Wesley Rawls and what would become the future of my path as a prepper, as a Rawlsian survivalist, for lack of a better word, that meeting by itself would have been worth the price of admission. Every conversation that I had with Flint, every chat, every text message will be treasured and missed. So we could just take a moment of silence for Flint's passing, and prayers for all of my people of faith out there, any faith, for his surviving family. So thanks for that. So yes, rest in peace, Brother Flint. And this episode of the sermon will be dedicated to your memory, because we're going to talk about some things that you and I spoke in great depth and at great length about. But before we get off into that, first a shout out to our flagship sponsors. And you knew we had to do it. First of all, my Viking brothers from Casey and Dusty Tellison from Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. Check them out on Facebook. Check them out on all social media. And if you are in the region, check them out in person when they've got the food truck out there, when they got the Viking longship, the warship, the smoker truck, when it's out there at one of the local events, and go take care of them, man. Again, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. And of course, Brother Roman and Allie and Roxy and the bevy of beautiful women over at Opium Tales. OpiumTales.com. You can check out his artwork and his testosterone-driven commentary. He is one of my oldest and dearest friends. He is Opium Tales, by God. They are the erotic pinups and portraits people. So definitely check him out. Check out his work. Check out his commentary. You will not be disappointed. Okay. So without going back into the COVID cast, because I promised we were not going to do that, I did allude to the fact that we would be doing some COVID commentary. We're going to get that out of the way quickly, and then we're going to move on to Ryan's rabbit hole, which is going to segue into the focus for the rest of the program. So let's get this viral bullshit out of the way really, really quickly so we can move on to bigger and better things. Some health experts, this is according to the Los Angeles Times, Some health experts are questioning whether federal officials move too fast in relaxing mask recommendations that would allow for fully vaccinated against COVID-19 to shed face coverings in most indoor and outdoor settings. And they are suggesting California and local leaders move a bit more cautiously in easing mask mandates. I'm going to keep this short and sweet, folks. The cult of fear, the cult of Fauci, as I discussed last week, is fucking over. Sorry, Sparky, but you're going to have to cope without your face diaper. See, here's the thing. We've been beaten over the head with the cudgel of follow the science. But as I and anyone with two brain cells to rub together have maintained from the beginning of this thing, it was never about the science. It was about the control. And now that the science is saying take it off and relax the restrictions, suddenly follow the science is not such a hard rule after all. It's a polite suggestion. And now that suggestion is not as polite. Take a look at who is doing what. I have said this since the beginning of this bullshit. I've said it from the very, very beginning. Pay close attention to who does what and who says what over the course of this thing as it runs its course. Otherwise, intelligent people are going to jump on the fear and control bandwagon. And we have seen that they are legion. They are maintaining it. And you are seeing the people now that want to hang on. Now that the science, which is all that we were supposed to follow from the very beginning, is saying, hey, take the fucking mask off and relax the restrictions. Watch the ones, watch them closely and cut them out of your fucking life. I don't care if they're friends. I don't care if they're spouses. I don't care if they're family members. Cut them out of your fucking life. Because now the much vaunted science is saying, take off the face diapers and relax the restrictions. If they are persisting in the narrative, what did we say at the very beginning? What did we say? Caitlin Johnstone's column, and I run hot and cold on Caitlin. What did she say? Whoever controls the narrative controls the world. And they have seized control of the narrative. They will continue to push it. That Maddow guy and other folks in the mainstream media will continue to push it. Watch the ones that are pushing control and fear now. Because now that the science is saying control and fear need to be alleviated, the ones who persist in it have shown us their true motivations. They have shown us that they are not only slaves to the narrative, but are willing to be servile in the same way that every authoritarian regime has ever come to power. They are useful idiots. They are useful idiots. They will continue to push the narrative long after the truth comes out. I implore you, if these people are involved in your lives on whatever level, if they are friends, if they are co-workers while you're stuck on the job site with them, I'm sorry about that. If they are friends, if they are spouses, if they are family members, cut them summarily and unceremoniously out of your life. Summarily and unceremoniously. Those are my college words. I have like 3 of those. Yeah, so there's that. Yes. Okay. So moving on, I wanted to get that out of the way just to reinforce that you should be paying attention. But there's a lot of things that you should be paying attention to. You should be paying attention to some of the narratives that are coming out now about the UFO thing. This seems like a complete lack of a segue, but it'll all tie in. You see, things that were once the realm of conspiracy theory are now all coming to fruition. You have heard me say this before, and feel free to use it as you see fit. Everything, boys and girls, is tinfoil hat until it's declassified. That's right. It's all tinfoil hat until it is declassified. And if you can't handle that, you can engage in whatever hashtag intellectual gymnastics you need to sustain the narrative that we're all fucking crazy. But now the things are on our side. A lot of things that were once taken for granted, and we're oh man, I had you're going to do it ceremoniously. Okay, we'll make a big ceremony out of it, Dennis. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Again, let's keep it light, boys and girls. I'm going to jump into the Ryan's rabbit hole section right here. We're going to jump into this early because it's going to lead us to things which are going to lead us to other things which are going to tie this whole thing in together. First, a little sip of liquid enthusiasm. To flush out the pipes and to ease the mind. Ryan's rabbit hole this week deals with Clovis culture. Now, guys who are vaguely familiar with early evidence of early human civilization in North America. Now, Graham Hancock has done some pioneering work dealing with Clovis culture and early settlement of the Americas that predate the supposed First Nation people. Again, that is going to upset a few people's delicate sensibilities when I discuss that the First Nation people might not. In fact, there's a very good case that they may not have been the first human inhabitants of North America. Hashtag hate facts. Again, I am not the authority, but that's why it's Ryan's rabbit hole. We're going to send you down that with the search terms being Graham Hancock and Clovis culture. That's how we're going to send it down. But yes, they were a Paleo-American culture dating back to prehistory. They're called the Clovis culture because the first discovery of the things that identified them as a culture were found outside of Clovis, New Mexico. I don't know if you've ever been. It's remote, shall we say. But they found the remains of a woolly mammoth after a flash flood cleared a bunch of old sediment off of it. And they found some really well-crafted spear points and evidence that this Paleo-American culture had hunted megafauna. And by megafauna, that's a nice way. Again, that's another one of my 3 college words. Megafauna means big fucking animals. We're talking about woolly mammoths. We're talking about the Baluchitherium. We're talking about a lot of creatures that no longer walk the face of the earth. And part of the Clovis culture theory is that they sort of, because they disappeared. Okay, that's the salient point. And I want you to maintain that. It'll be important later. There will be a quiz. One of the thoughts behind their mysterious disappearance was that they hunted the megafauna to extinction and thus took themselves out of the natural order and out of the food chain because, like a runaway virus, they had basically killed off their own host, their own food supply. It's one of the reasons why we don't have Baluchitherium and woolly mammoths still walking around on the North American continent. Again, there's a ton of stuff, and I could easily spend the entire hour on all of the things tied to Clovis culture. But again, this is Ryan's rabbit hole, and I want you to do the research. Again, your search terms are going to be Clovis culture and Graham Hancock. And Graham Hancock is going to be a rabbit hole of its own because he has done a lot of pioneering work, which is largely regarded by mainstream media as widely debunked without a single piece of evidence of the actual debunking of any of the material. It's, oh, no, he's been widely debunked and widely discredited. Really? Could we see some examples? Well, I can't do your homework for you. You've got to look up your own, but he's widely debunked and widely discredited. And he appeared on the Rogan podcast. And Rogan is a dumb person's idea of a smart person. And anyone who appears, okay, we already know it. Go down the rabbit hole yourself. Do your own fucking homework. Okay, again, your search terms are going to be Clovis culture and Graham Hancock. Look into that. It's a disappeared civilization, and it's some fascinating stuff. A couple of the articles that I pull up here, one of the things that I was just discussing was that, and again, one of the first articles that pulled up was actually on Nat Geo, off of the History Channel, which is owned by Nat Geo. Why did the Clovis people mysteriously vanish? There's dozen theories on that. This particular article that I'm looking at on the screen in front of me deals with the hunting of the megafauna to extinction, and they ran out of fucking food. There's another article from a website called Ancient Origins that deals with the whole thing. Again, this culture was there for a very short period of time and then mysteriously disappeared without a trace. So again, that's anything that Graham Hancock may be speaking of is purely fucking speculation, because societies don't, advanced civilizations, or even moderately advanced for their time civilizations, don't deal with disappearing without a trace. Anybody ever watch X-Files and the Anasazi mythology? Yeah, that was based on another semi-advanced Paleolithic, or Paleo-American, more to the point, tribe, culture, civilization, for lack of a better word, that dwelt in the Pueblos, and they were highly advanced in terms of their tools and their dwellings, much like the Clovis culture, and lived in what is now the southwestern United States, just like the Clovis culture, and disappeared without a fucking trace, and left nothing behind but speculation, much like the Clovis culture. Okay, you see where I'm going with this, obviously. Now we know, boys and girls, don't we know that any civilization or any tribal group, even a Paleolithic civilization that was slightly more advanced than other groups that were their contemporaries. I mean, certainly things like this don't just disappear, and that's why Atlantis, the whole Atlantean myth, is complete bullshit. See, because no highly advanced civilization like that would just disappear without a trace. I'm going to throw something into your bread oven here, just a quick little poke into your bread oven for those people out there that might feel like, yes, it's completely impossible for advanced civilizations to disappear without leaving a trace of their greatness. I know it's a bit of a stretch, not quite a consistent segue, but bear with me because I'm going somewhere with this. Certainly, in so short a span of time, civilizations don't disappear. Civilizations don't collapse in so short a period of time. It's never that abrupt. Leaving alone the fact that in a scant 5-year period, the Roman Empire lost half of its landmass and 2/3 of its subjects when it was in the stages of its collapse. But certainly there's not any modern analog, nothing we could compare that to that would indicate that we are in a terminal tailspin. And as Joey, the Sultan of Sarcasm, likes to say, circling the drain. Certainly nothing like that exists in modern society. Like, for instance, if I were to show you this picture of Venice Beach, California, southern tip of Los Angeles, right along the coast. Now, that is a picture of Venice Beach in 1980. Downloaded that shortly before we went to air today. That is a picture of Venice Beach in 1980. A whole lot of people, beautiful buildings. It's a sunny day out. Everyone's having a good time. And a scant 40 years later, this is that same Venice Beach. The trappings and the remains of what used to be a highly developed and functional civilization that in the space of just 40 years has disintegrated into chaos and filth and degradation, and shows but a shadow of its former self. Now, I want you to imagine an archaeological dig trying to make sense of the abrupt downturn, since we're talking about the way that civilizations collapse in very short order. Now, of course, that's just an isolated example, and I certainly couldn't provide any more than that. Like this picture of Detroit in the 1950s. Again, the symbol of American success, industrial development, capitalism at its peak, and a mere 70 years later, that same Detroit. Not the same city block, obviously, but I did do the Google map work on that, and it's within a couple of miles of where the original picture was taken. That is the wasteland that Detroit has collapsed into in a mere 70 years. So we've got California, we've got Detroit as examples. I want to tie it into what we were just talking to what we were just speaking about first, down Ryan's rabbit hole with the Clovis culture and the way that, yes, highly advanced civilizations, even Paleolithic groups, which were just slightly elevated above other Paleolithic groups that were their contemporaries, both geographically and temporally. Geographically and temporally. Again, we're back to the college words. I have like 3 of those. I'm over 3? Okay. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, they can vanish. And a highly advanced civilization like the mythical Atlantis, which has left traces of itself all over the fucking planet, can disappear. So don't ever rule out something simply because it's coming from a source that you may not be familiar with, a source that you may not be comfortable with, a source that you ever hear has been widely discredited and debunked unless you have seen the work yourself that has supposedly discredited and debunked the aforementioned work, unless you have seen evidence to the contrary yourself and it passes the sniff test for you. Don't just take the word of someone saying that someone's been widely discredited and debunked. So look into Clovis culture, look into the Anasazi, look into the work of Graham Hancock. That squares us up with Ryan's rabbit hole for the week. And Ryan, as always, I appreciate you throwing this esoteric, obscure stuff out just to keep everybody's brain active. I appreciate that. Moving on, having covered what went before with Ryan's rabbit hole and the disappearance of the Clovis culture and the Anasazi, how about where we stand as a people, as a culture, and as an empire? Empire, there's that E word. As an empire in decline. Obviously, it's almost cliched at this point. We have, we're constantly hearing the comparisons to the Roman Empire, the fall of Rome, and all of these other things. They may be cliched, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a heavy element of truth to all of them, particularly here in the West. There are only 2 in the history of man. There are only 2 bloodlines that have ever produced sustainable, advanced technological civilizations of which we are aware. Okay. Barring the Atlantean mythology, there are only 2 bloodlines in recorded history that have produced those sustained, advanced civilizations. In spite of tons of infighting in both of those bloodlines, they managed to hold it together. And that is the peoples of Europe and the peoples of North Asia, the Chinese primarily. I know this hashtag hate fact may make a lot of people uncomfortable, but if you look at recorded history, sorry, that's the fucking deal. I hate if that has shattered anyone's narrative. It wasn't my intent to make you uncomfortable, but I speak in truths. I speak in facts. You're more than welcome to shoot those facts down if you have better and more applicable facts. feel free to shoot that down, but you don't get to just call it names and act as if it were somehow not fucking true. You don't get to do that. So those two civilizations have or those two bloodlines have produced those sustainable civilizations. And now, oddly enough, history seems to have put us on a trajectory where the respective civilizations that those two bloodlines have produced seem to be on a collision course. Now, there are more things to the subtle nuances of this than the bloodlines in question, certainly. You have cultural elements, you have religious elements, you do have racial elements. But these two civilizations seem to be on a collision course. And unfortunately, one of them, the one that has created the nation in which we live, regardless of your race and ethnicity and historical background, it was Western civilization that conquered and carved out its place on this continent, that created the modern industrial civilization in which we all live and from which we all benefit. That's where we are. So now that these two bloodlines and the civilizations that they have created are on a collision course, perhaps we need to start taking a more serious look at the preservation of the culture in question. China is certainly taking a hard look at that. The beautiful thing about the Chinese is that they are unencumbered by having to give a shit what the people think, because they are not a representative democracy, because they have evolved into an authoritarian civilization, or a civilization ruled over by an authoritarian government, a communist authoritarian government specifically. They don't have to give a shit what people think of them. Also, they are culturally homogenous. Big bonus for them, because they are blissfully unencumbered by having to give a shit about anyone accusing them of racism. Last time I checked, China was about 98 to 99%, wait for it, Chinese. Last time I checked, not a single voice in any media outlet, any fucking where, was saying that China had a diversity problem. Again, that's one of the things where they have an advantage going forward. We hear a lot about the horrors of European colonialism in Africa, which, first of all, let me just briefly address that in a sidebar. See, the way I remember it, when the Europeans showed up, you guys were, wait for it, living in mud huts, shitting in your own backyard, had not developed a written language. Some of you had never seen a wheel. We came in and for the petty price of some of your resources, created an infrastructure, including an electrical grid. We showed you the joys of indoor plumbing, sustainable agriculture. We built schools, hospitals, doubled your life expectancy, and cut your infant mortality rate in half. What terrible fucking people we are. Bad whitey. Anyway, we hear so much about the horrors of European colonialism. If Africa thought it had it bad under the Europeans, ooh, to quote Nicholson's Joker from the original Batman, the Chinese are stepping up going, wait till they get a load of me. Yeah, because they're coming. And in fact, they're already there. They've been there for a very long time. And if you thought the resource exploitation and the so-called oppression of the Europeans was bad, holy fuck, I grieve for Africa. I fucking grieve for Africa, because the Chinese are coming, and they don't give a fuck that you think they're racist, and they don't give a fuck that they think that you think that they are exploiting you. That's what they're there for, and they're not making any bones about it. They don't care how the rest of the world views them, because unlike the civilization that Europeans have created here in the West, they plan to win. Once upon a time, we did. We seem to have fallen off from that. Let's explore that a little further, shall we? See, because again, the Chinese look like they are on an upswing, and we, on the other hand, seem to be in a long terminal decline. Before I get off into the wordy speech on that, I want to turn you guys on to a series of paintings. These are classical paintings. You can look them up online, but it's a series of paintings called The Course of Empire. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with that, just Google Course of Empire paintings and it'll pull them up. They've been favorites of mine for a long time because I'm a big fan of history and I'm a big fan of how history runs in cycles. The first in the series is the savage state. This is where we're all pretty much hunter-gatherers living under primitive standards without really the trappings of civilization. And it's all captured here in this painting. This is early man. This is pre what most folks would call civilized. And it moves on to number 2, which is the pastoral setting. Now, this is early. And in the West, we had our inception of this in some of the early European empires. Now, some people will draw distinctions and say that the Greeks were not truly European. They were Mediterranean. We can play those ridiculous intellectual gymnastics all fucking day if we want to. But it's getting away from the point. We had the Greeks. We had the Athenians and the Spartans. And eventually we had the Romans. And the Romans, as well as the advanced in the later stages of the Greek Empire, took it to level 3, and particularly the Romans. And you can see the trappings of Roman and some Greek architecture in panel 3 of the Course of Empire. This one is called Consummation. And this is where everything is at its peak. This is where all of your routine day-to-day needs are taken care of in spades, and we have the freedom to advance our intellectual pursuits, to engage in those intellectual gymnastics, and sometimes to think ourselves into great big circles that wind up being counterproductive. But again, you've heard it's bumper sticker philosophy and it's cliched. But again, just because it's bumper sticker philosophy doesn't mean that it isn't true. And that is that hard times create tough men create good times create weak men create hard times. This panel illustrates where we start generating weak men, which lead to the hard times that I mentioned, as depicted in panel 4, destruction. And here we are teetering on the ragged edges of this panel right now, in my observation. You're free to disagree, and I'd love for you to make your case in the comments or send me personal hate mail, whatever you're up for. But I feel like we're right on the ragged edges of panel 4, destruction. This is where we're at right now. You need look no further than the riots that took place all last summer. The mostly peaceful but somewhat fiery protests that took place over all of last summer in places like Minneapolis, in places like Portland, Seattle, Washington, D.C., basically New York City, New Jersey. Every major city in the country experienced this on some level. And if we make a course correction, we could possibly put off the final panel, desolation, because this is all that will remain of us. All of the millennia that we have moved forward, creating the beauty, the culture, the glory that is Western civilization, nothing will stand but ruin. That is the course of empire. From the savage to the pastoral, to the consummation, to the destruction, and finally, to the desolation. Again, your Google search terms are going to be Course of Empire paintings, so look those up. The artist in question only needed to study history. That is the course of empire. That is the course of civilization, not just empire. I don't want you to I don't want you to fixate on any one particular culture, civilization, or bloodline. That is the course of history. That is human nature. And it repeats itself over and over and over again. But for the sake of today's discussion, we are going to focus on the West and some of the signs. Now, some of the things that I'm pulling from here, some of the sources you're going to disagree with, some of the things that I am going to assert you're going to disagree with. I disagree with the authors of some of these things. Just like with everything else, I encourage you to do your own homework. I'm not your fucking guru. I'm just throwing some things into the bread oven and seeing what rises. I'm just running some things up a flagpole and see who fucking salutes. So for all my prophets of doom out there, all my sinner sisters, all my reverends rangers, do your own homework, man. Do your own homework. We're trying to cultivate minds here. But some of the signs of a culture is in. One of the first signs is that it's a society which no longer has any spiritual strength. Now, we're not going to get off into Abrahamic religions and how the cultural religions that initially shaped European civilization were betrayed in the name of the expansion of Christianity and Catholicism, or how Catholicism pulled it all together and brought us all together again under a uniform spiritual element of the culture, things like that. I hold that religion, whether or not you or I or anyone else agrees with it, is one of the fundamental things that holds complex civilizations together. It provides a spiritual anchor around which the rest of the culture can bond. Okay. It might not be historically tied to that culture. Better if it is, certainly. You see the big Mjolnir hammer hanging around my neck, and I honor the Aesir and the old gods and the ancestral gods of our people, but I see the importance of Roman Catholicism and the Judeo-Christian religion. Please stop throwing things at me. And pulling Europe together under one cultural heading. Granted, again, we can have the debates about the nature of Abrahamic religions and how they're not native to our people, but long and the short of it is, without some sort of spiritual structure, the cultures decline. They fall apart. I don't need to elaborate on this. Take a look around. Turn on a radio, walk outside, look up and down the street, take a drive through your town and examine the billboards. Spiritual bonding, the strength of faith holding this culture together. And a lot of it is because it is a melting pot. Multicultural civilizations don't tend to work because you've got so many influences, and it tears apart the bonding central principle. And that's where we wind up. Wow. Okay. And then the light flickers over my head. I wonder if that was a message. The decline of the family, another powerful indicator. And when you have elements in this culture in particular, I'm looking at you, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, any of the Marxist organizations that are telling us that the nuclear family is an outdated idea. Let me break it down for you, Sparky. No civilization has ever managed to advance or prosper without the importance of the nuclear family as a central core tenet. Not the North Asians, not the Europeans, Eastern or Western, even under communism. And in fact, some of the Eastern Bloc nations are the ones that are holding up better now because they at least appreciated a strength of nationalism and a strength of nuclear family, because it's what helped them survive the communist takeover. It helped them survive the communist era, and they're not going back. So yeah, we have lost that. Not only have we lost it, but elements of our civilization, including the mainstream media, seem hell-bent for leather to destroy the final remnants that are left of that nuclear family structure, let alone Black Lives Matter and other Marxist organizations. Did I just call Black Lives Matter a Marxist organization? Yes, I did. I won't apologize, and I won't take it back. If you're waiting for that, don't hold your breath, Sparky. You're going to turn blue. Another important indicator, life and the sanctity thereof. And I know a lot of you are looking at me cross-eyed right now going, really, dude, this from you? This from you? Yeah, this from me. I don't really hold human life to that high of a fucking standard, especially looking around and being as disgusted as I am about the nature of our species these days. I'm really not a big fan of human life. Uh, I think probably 7 out of 10 people are only alive because it's against the law to kill them. But that's how I feel on a personal level. If the entire culture fucking felt that way, well, then they would do things like, oh, I don't know, let's be really crazy. Let's open up our minds really, really wild and just completely fantasize. They do things like, oh, I don't know, cultural violence, genocide. We could make the argument that abortion would play into that. We could make the argument that entertainment consisting entirely of blood soaked degeneracy would be an element of that. And again, please draw the distinction between how I feel personally and what I feel for the strength of a culture. I may be a fan of violence in cinema. I may be a fan of porn. I may be a fan of all kinds of things. But culturally, guess what? It's degeneracy that winds up in a decline, historically speaking. Sorry, but there's no way around that. A prevalence of base degeneracy in our entertainment. We remember from the Romans, the bread and circuses. What do we view now? See how many old guys are on my. Let me see how many old guys are on my feed. Do we remember the MTV Video Awards? I want to say it was 1985, where Madonna got on and performed like a virgin. She was wearing a skimpy skirt and a bustier and writhing about on the floor in all sorts of sexual poses, and it was scandalous for 1985. Absolutely scandalous. She didn't show any ass. She didn't show any tit. She wasn't twerking. She wasn't spreading her legs and touching herself. She was just wearing a bustier and a ballerina skirt and rolling about on stage singing the lyrics to that song. And I'm here to tell you that on the 3 major networks that were available to us at the time, it was absolutely scandalous. We heard nothing else for the next fucking 3 days. But has entertainment gone too far? Has entertainment gone too far? It's weird how things change, because I thought it was very, very silly at the time, the whole prospect that this was going to somehow set off. If you could have shown me where we were going to wind up in 2021 by heading down that path, I would have been one of those assholes that called it. I really would have, if I saw where the fuck it was going. But yeah, it was absolutely scandalous. I see worse than that on children's programming now. Violent crime. Another indicator. A declining middle class. There's a powerful indicator. And I don't think I don't think we could go anywhere but repeating the course of the Greeks and the Romans and every other collapse of a major civilization. But we're headed that way. The West. More to the point, we have, in the same way the Romans had the Huns and all of the other barbarian tribes, for lack of a better word, the barbarians were at the gates, and then the barbarians were inside the gates, and then they sacked Rome. The barbarians are already well inside the gates here, and they are undermining everything within, both on a cultural level, on a physical level, on a criminal level. They're undermining everything. And the roots to which we are attached are being destroyed. Now, again, when this whole thing kicked off last summer, what did we hear? Well, it's just Confederate statues. Only it wasn't just Confederate statues. It was Confederate statues at first, and who could oppose that? I mean, the racism of the Confederacy, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Ryan, I do say. I and Oswald Spengler and others, yes. Yeah. who could oppose the tearing down of Confederate statues? Well, I would, because it's never going to stop there. You have to understand, no matter what they say, the war is not against racism. The war is not against any of the buzzwords with which we're beaten over the head. The war is not against any of those things. The war is against the nature of the West itself. It is against our founding principles. It is against our culture. It is against, and look no further than what happens as soon as those statues are torn down. What are they replaced with? What are they replaced with? These are the acts of conquering armies. You tear down the statue of the old boss and you put up a statue of the new boss. This is not forward thinking. This is not undoing the horrors of the past. This is not making amends for historical atrocities. This is, we want you dead. This is, we want you gone. I would be not only impressed, but flattered by the candor of it if you would just come out and say so. And now, much to my delight, they are. Again, I deal in facts. I deal in truths. If you want to come for me and you want my culture and you want my race and you want my blood and all of these things wiped off the face of the fucking earth, I'd appreciate it if you just told me up front so we could just knuckle up and get down to it. Because I'm not going to apologize. And I'm not going to kowtow and I'm not going to bend the fucking knee. Again, the candor would be refreshing. But they're never going to give it that kind of honesty. Or rarely they do. They let it slip. This is not about undoing wrongs. This is about crushing what is and instituting what they hope will be. Now, does this tie into the Chinese? Maybe. The Chinese certainly have their tentacles in over here. You want to talk about barbarians in the gates? It doesn't get much better than the Oval Office. Got a man in that office that is a geriatric dementia case whose family is entirely compromised. He has surrounded himself with people who are similarly compromised. We have a man on the House Intelligence Committee right now who was directly compromised by a Chinese intelligence agent that our dutiful mainstream media is failing to report intentionally because they are, wait for it, also compromised. You can't negotiate. You can't make peace with people that want you fucking dead. You can't negotiate. You can't make amends. You can't, in the great bumper sticker, coexist with people who want you fucking dead, with people who want your culture eliminated. Is society really collapsing? Are we in that stage? Again, getting back to Course of Empire, first we have an age of pioneers, right? And those are the first guys that show up on the shores. And in the course of the American Empire, that's how it worked. We had people fleeing persecution in other places that showed up here. We had criminals fleeing that showed up here. We had a lot of good and bad people that fucking showed up here. They were the pioneers. They were bold enough to take a risk of sailing across a fucking ocean that was barely charted on wooden ships, knowing that 1 out of 3 weren't going to fucking make it. But they took a chance. They had that kind of guts. We no longer do. That's usually followed by an age of conquest. And of course, we ripped shit over everything that lay in front of us here on the North American continent. You know, the horrors that we committed against the First Nation people, because Lord knows it was all just fucking peace pipes and buffalo hunts before Whitey showed up. Certainly not things like, mutilation, fucking rape as a weapon of war, internecine genocide from tribe to tribe, starvation reprisals, any of those things. That certainly didn't exist before Bad Whitey showed up. No, we came in and we fucking conquered. Stop apologizing for that. Just a thought. Generally, the course of empire along that line proceeds to an age of commerce. And we certainly built that, especially post-industrial revolution. A lot of people eaten alive, both figuratively and literally, by the machinery of industrial production. But my God, it made us one of the most powerful. It made us the most powerful civilization on the fucking planet, all in the span of less than 200 years. Holy fuck, we did some amazing shit. Then comes an age of affluence. We're certainly there now. Affluence leading to an age of intellect. And that's where we are trailing out. We're trailing out of the age of intellect and into the age of decadence. Keep in mind, it's the decadence that is the primary indicator. I'm not going to get all more, I'm not going to engage in any sort of bullshit moral puritanism here. We all know the kind of shit that I'm into. I love my violence. I love my freak sex. I love my porn, all those things. I'm not going to paint myself as some highbrow individual that is above this kind of thing. But again, where I'm at on a personal level versus where I'm at on a cultural and historical observation level, we're in trouble, folks. We're in trouble. Bread and circuses to the fucking hilt. And now we have means outside of a coliseum and gladiator spectacles to keep the people entertained, to keep the people living in fear. Because if you keep them entertained and you keep them in fear, you keep them under control. I did have one pulled up from resilience.org. 4 reasons, and I'll get into them really, really quickly, why they think that Western civilization won't decline, it will collapse. Yeah. Again, your mileage may vary, but difference number one, unlike all previous civilizations, and again, this is from resilience.org, unlike all previous civilizations, modern industrial civilization is powered by an exceptionally rich, non-renewable, and irreplaceable energy source, fossil fuels. Now, again, same point could be made. Those things are going to run out on their own, but now they're actually trying to push for the elimination. They don't seem to understand that that is just going to speed the plow of social collapse because renewables aren't up to the fucking standard yet. Difference number 2, unlike past civilizations, the economy of industrial society is capitalist. Production for profit is prime directive and its driving force. Once they remove those fossil fuels from the equation, what happens to the economy? It collapses and people fucking starve. This horrible capitalism, this horrible American capitalism that has pulled more people out of fucking poverty than any other economic force on the fucking planet. They're trying to yank the rug out from under it. And what do you suppose is going to happen? To hear them tell it, it'll be a fucking Marxist utopia, and everyone will be treated equally dead, equal in the same sense that that Pol Pot's followers were in year 0. Look that up. Difference number 3, unlike past societies, industrial civilization is a Roman, Chinese, Aztec. Modern civilization is human and planetary. They also say ecocidal, argument that I'm not going to get into right now. But again, everything is dependent on the economic machine that we have created. And if you pull the rug out from under that, what's left? It's our economy, our culture, our civilization that has built this machine, that has lifted so many out of poverty. In our absence, what rises? Well, the only remaining contender, the Chinese, the Asians, the North Asians, the Chinese, and their authoritarian dictatorship. Do you think they give a fuck how many billions of people are going to starve out in the rest of the world? Hell, in Mao's Great Leap Forward, it's estimated that they killed 100 million of their own. Do you really think they're going to care what happens to the rest of the world? Not in the same way that those horrible Western capitalists do. And difference number 4, human civilization's collective capacity to confront its mounting crises is crippled by a fragmented political system of antagonistic nations ruled by corrupt elites who care more about power and wealth than people and the planet. Right now, the AOCs of the world are hearing that, and they're thinking to themselves, yeah, that's right, man. Americans care more about profit than they do about people. What do you think is the fucking alternative? Because I promise you, as we discussed for the last couple of weeks, the Chinese, who are definitely our adversaries in every way, political, cultural, military, they certainly don't present a better alternative. So what do? More to the point, what do we hope for? Because a lot of the things that we would like to do are going to prove ultimately ineffectual if we cannot maintain and preserve a representative government. Those are the anchors. And those are the things that we're going to have to cling to, boys and girls. Cling to, even if it upsets us, even if certain particular politicians we might find distasteful, even if certain ideas we may find at odds with what we may dig personally, we have to put principle over personal. Because I promise you, if the founding values that were given to the world by the West, because before Western civilization, the Western civilization that gave us the Magna Carta, the Western civilization that gave us, the Reformation, the Western civilization that gave us modern industrial society, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance. Without those things, without those principles, the strength and sovereignty of the individual being first and foremost among them, representative government being among them, free markets being among them, and cultural integrity being among them. In spite of everything else, in spite of the distractions, in spite of, in spite of even the narrative, if we do not cling to those principles above and beyond everything else, we may find ourselves here. Another civilization that went through the stages, perished, and perhaps like Atlantis, disappeared without a trace. Immortalized only through word-of-mouth mythologies passed on in hushed whispers to our descendants and our progeny. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. We're a couple of minutes over. I appreciate you guys sticking it out. I know it was kind of a meandering little rant. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate Ryan for giving us that rabbit hole to go down. I'm sure that probably didn't turn out exactly like you thought the thought process was going to go. Anyway, if anything that I had to say you feel like is worth it, you can throw me some coin. I'm on Facebook Pay. I pass around a digital collection plate. I'm on Facebook Pay. I'm on Cash App, I'm on Venmo, I'm on PayPal, I'm on all of them. So if you want to throw me some coin, hey man, it'd be much appreciated. But even if you can't, or you're not in a position to, or you really just aren't that big of a fan, or kind of wish I was dead. Actually, not those guys. You guys probably are going to spread the word. But yeah, if you're not in a position to help, throw a little bit of coin, man, you can spread the word about the program. You can tell all your friends who are like minds and kindred spirits about this crazy fat ass old cripple who goes on a rant for about an hour a week every Sunday, dealing with the issues of the world from his own unique perspective. I appreciate all you guys coming out, man. Brother James, yeah, man. See you right back at it, man. Okay, I can't cover everybody. I love you guys for showing up. Thanks, man. We appreciate it. Above and beyond everything else, man, you guys remember the central tenets, right? The three central tenets. And all of my prophets of doom and my reverence ranges, my sinners out there, you know it by heart. What do we strive for, people? Be the signal in a world full of noise. Be the light in a world full of darkness. And be that strength in a world full of weakness. Nothing else would be more important. Keep your 3 B's in order, boys and girls. Beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. I'm going to throw in a 4th B, bleach. We can discuss that probably next week. I'm going to get into some more of that stuff, provided nothing monumental happens over the course of the week. Appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the support. Ryan, I appreciate the rabbit hole, man. You kind of really sort of inspired the whole rant this week. And for everything else you've done for me, I appreciate you, brother. I love you, man. Thanks, everybody else, for coming out. Don't forget, man, listen, we don't do black pill around here. We don't black pill around here. Yeah, some of this stuff is very heavy, and it'll weigh on you. Don't let it get you down. Because, again, the world can be as fucked up as it needs to be. Your world only has to be as fucked up as you allow it to be. So keep your head focused. Keep your heart right. Keep your body strong. Keep moving forward. Meantime, between time, take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you next Sunday. Love you guys. Appreciate you showing up. Peace.